Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Highly Spiritual Person podcast. I'm Camille Elizabeth. This week, I talked to Sunshine of Sunshine Readings. She is the pink-haired psychic medium, and she's also a soul healer, an eclectic witch, and a magician. We start off this episode talking about Sunshine's Catholic upbringing, how doubts started to creep in when it came to religion, and how she discovered her spiritual gifts as a psychic and a medium. This is also the first episode where something paranormal or spiritual has actually happened during the show. We had a spirit show up, which was pretty funny, which I think you guys will enjoy. So without further ado, here's Sunshine of Sunshine Readings. All right, Sunshine, thank you so much for joining the show. First of all, can I call you Sunshine? Is that okay for me to call you Sunshine?
You can absolutely call me Sunshine. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's such a great name. So you are so many different things. When I was going through your site and all your materials, I saw you mention psychic medium, soul healer, eclectic witch, magician. You had so many great titles and great things that you do to help people. And I feel like most people don't necessarily start their lives with that many great things that they do. They generally, unless they're very lucky, they don't tend to start their path there. So I want to know, where did this all begin? What did childhood look like for you? Did you have these kind of practices, or did you have a different religious upbringing?
Yeah. I love this. And so many folks are always curious, and they ask about, like, when did my gifts start, right? Like, when did I start doing it? And you actually said, what is the upbringing?
Yeah.
So I was born and raised Catholic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised Catholic. I was baptized when I was a little tiny baby, little tiny baby. I went to Catholic school for 13 years of my life. So when I say I was born and raised Catholic, I was born and raised
cradle.
Catholic.
So cradle Catholic, as they call it.
Yeah. And so I was, these gifts and these experiences as an adult, I've realized a lot of my experience I've had since I was a child.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. I didn't know how they were showing up or anything of that nature. But, I went through, I went to Catholic school, so I didn't go to catechism. I had literally my religion classes in school. I, received my first communion and, still surprises me, I think, to this day that they literally, in a Catholic church thought it was okay to give wine to a child. I state to this day, I mean, my whole spiritual path and where I'm at, we're kind of like going to fast forward and then we're going to hit back into that time. Like, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I've in my recovery have realized the first drink I ever had was walking up and receiving communion. Right. And feeling and experiencing and witnessing that feeling and that taste and that sensation. And, so I did first communion. And then when you're around in 8th grade, you're going to go through your confirmation. But it was around this time, and I was in Girl Scouts throughout like my grade school and middle school and junior high and everything. I was in Girl Scouts, I think, from the time that I was like 6 all the way until I was 6 years old until I was in 8th grade, so like 7 years, which is a Catholic program as it is. Girl Scouts is a Catholic program too, right? So very much so. But I remember my Girl Scouts was at a different parish than the parish I grew up in. And the parish that my Girl Scouts troop went to, we'd have to go to mass and stuff for Girl Scouts. They had female altar girls. I was like, oh, wow, like, this is amazing. Awesome. How cool. Like, yes. And so I go to my parish priest. His name was Father Kevin. And I can remember I was like standing in the church, and we're like at the back of the pews, and I found him. And I think I might've been reading that day or something like that. Cause I would read the scriptures and gospel. I would be a part of progression, the progression to take the things up, to the altar, the beginning of church, all that. I was involved. And I said, Father Kevin, I said, I wanted to know, can I be an altar girl?
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you, he's like, no. And I was like, what do you mean? I go, but there's like, St. Peter and Paul, like they, no. And he goes, it's my church. I
Oh,
say no. And I was like,
wow.
and in my head, my little, like, however 10, 11-year-old head at that particular time, 12-year-old head, I'm like literally going, what do you mean it's your church? I thought this was God's house.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
I thought this was God's house. Well,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Mhm.
And so it was really from that point forward that I started to question it. And
That
I
moment.
started that moment, like,
Yeah.
how in the world could you be teaching me, and like I be being taught all of this religion, all of these stories, God's house, God's church, God's home, and to have had this person, this human, this other
Mhm.
who was an adult, and I get it, he was a priest and all that, but how does he get to make these rules?
Yeah. Yeah.
It just really blew my mind. And I've come to realize, like, now as an adult, and I've been in the spiritual world, I actually have, if you have any of your audience members that are familiar with human design, are you familiar with human
Yes, of
design at all?
course,
Right.
of course. Yes, yes.
So my profile is a 2-5. I'm a hermit heretic.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, I've realized now as an adult that, like, I am meant to, like, don't
Yeah.
don't tell, like, I will push. You tell me I can't do something, I'm gonna go prove to you
You're
otherwise.
meant to
Right.
question. That is part of who you
Oh,
are.
that
Yeah.
is absolutely meant. Yes, absolutely, 100%. I always joke that the picture I get in my head is like I'm just this, like, crazy old witch that comes out of the wood once a month and just wreaks havoc in town and makes everyone question their beliefs, and
Yeah.
like, ha. But yeah, so that was it, that moment. And I mean,
Yeah.
I very distinctively remember that moment, and just it was a huge turning point in my life. And so I knew in that conversation
Yeah.
that I was the only person that was ever going to find truth.
Wow.
Nobody else.
So I love that. I want to just capitalize on that for a second. You are the only one who is ever going to find truth. Tell me more about that. Do you mean in your community, in your family, just or
To me, right? Like
just
like just to me, right? Like
yeah.
it was really in that moment that I was like, here is this individual that throughout. I mean, he was my priest, my pastor, my entire childhood,
Yeah.
right? So for 11 years of my life, I thought that this guy had all the spiritual and religious truths in him.
You trusted him. Yeah.
I trusted him. And he
Yeah.
came here and told, like, and so I knew that I was from that point forward, I was the only one that was going to be able to know that truth, the truth for me. It was up for me
Yeah.
to define, me to decide, and to me to uncover. And so I was crazy. I mean, so I still went to Catholic high school.
Yeah.
Um, was not a pleasant student in religion class. I'm certain of that. Right? Like asking everything. If I was awake, half the time I slept. But I would ask all why, every challenge I
Yeah.
could, every bit I could, because I didn't understand, and I think now as an adult looking back and realizing I didn't understand
Mhm.
why all the answers were so concrete,
Mhm.
why they were spoken as absolutes,
Yeah.
right? And just knowing that there's something else, right? And I think a lot of us that walk these spiritual paths, and out of all the people I've talked to, so
Mhm.
many have this story that in childhood, this gigantic question mark starts.
Yeah.
This why, this curiosity,
Yeah.
is there, and it's not just about bugs and dirt and
Yeah.
how does the sun come up every day.
Right,
it's
right,
it's
right.
like they're deep. I mean, children ask deep questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
I would love to know your thoughts on this because I definitely feel that way too. I had that question mark come up multiple times as a kid and as a young adult. And I went to a Catholic university and
Mm.
started asking those questions of other students and other people there. And the thing that I found, I didn't grow up Catholic, but the thing that I found was that I was the odd person for asking the questions. And everybody else was basically kind of like, why can't you just accept this truth? Did you ever run into that when you were talking to other peers or family members?
Ah, yeah, it's a really, really good question. I I didn't. I can't say that I ran into it. Now, mind you, I went to a public university and everything of that, so it might have been
Yeah.
different in a college,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I do think there's a time when you like get into adulthood where
Mhm.
you are like you changing your own beliefs in that moment could unravel your whole world.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Like, so you're
Yeah.
like, all I gotta do is get through 4 years of school. I ain't gonna challenge anything, right?
You
Like,
need just
I
some
am not,
stability. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna challenge anything, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't run into that, but I will tell you that I also, the area in Detroit that I live in has a very, very eclectic spirituality,
Mm.
where you will have, we have a very high, uh, Muslim population,
Mhm.
high
Mhm.
Christian,
Yeah.
big Jewish population. And so like I've also kind of always been around and swirled around a lot of different like religions and spiritualities.
Yeah.
And I've been very blessed that I've never been in the position or in a community
Mhm.
in any way, shape, or form where anything has ever been forced
Mm.
or where I have ever been chastised for being different. And I do say that I am very blessed
Yeah.
in that regards, because
Yeah.
that is not a common story,
Yeah.
right? There are many people that feel tremendous amounts of guilt and shame around a
Yeah.
chosen path, and that could be like being Christian in a Muslim
Mhm.
population or being Muslim in a Christian, like I am not
Sure.
saying one, anything a way, shape, or form. So I feel very
Yeah.
blessed that I've not, so I've not been in that position where I've had people wonder. But I will tell you, I sat at the tables in AA.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to people, God, Allah, okay,
Yeah.
cool, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, awesome. Well, we're just gonna wing it this time. And so
Yeah.
I refer to them as higher powers.
Yes. Yes.
And so I finally have someone pull me aside, and they're like, you do realize that you keep saying higher powers? Do you mean that? So I was like, yes, I do. I
Yeah.
was like, I have about 7 or 8 of them that hang around me, and I'm not going to choose any which one of them or which one's good, better than the other.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So, well, that kind of is a good segue into my next question as to at what point did you start to explore the world of spirituality that you're in now? I know you said that you think that was always a part of
Mm-hmm.
who you were, but at what point did you really
Mm-hmm.
become aware of it?
I was 16,
Yeah.
and I walked into my first metaphysics store
Ah, okay.
that literally is like 1 mile from where my current home is. No longer exists there. No longer
Yeah.
exists. But I walked into my first metaphysics store, and I
Yeah.
remember the scent of Nag Champa.
Yeah.
And for the first time in probably my entire life, feeling like I found something that I connected to. Not like my
Ah,
parents put me in, or
sure.
someone introduced me to, or my friends said, this is a really cool band for you to listen to. You should like, it was the first thing that I actually thought was something for me. And
Yeah.
so I literally, it was very funny. It was about a year ago. One of my best friends from like childhood, she goes, I found this book of yours. She goes, I don't know when you gave this to me. She goes, but there is a receipt in it that you've got to look at. And oh gosh, I can't remember what her last name is, but Judith, she does the Wheel of Life, the like
Uh-huh.
most common and chakra,
Yeah.
the wheel. Yes. This
Yes.
book that I bought in 1997
Yeah.
with a literal, you remember the credit card machines that you'd have
Oh,
to run?
yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
That is the receipt
Wow. Wow.
that is in this book. And so I remember going into that store as often as I possibly could, flipping through their books. I was 16 years old, so it's not like I had a lot of money, being
Yeah.
really excited to save up for to be able to afford my first psychic reading, being able to
Yeah.
buy my first book. And so I know that chakra book was one of my very first one. I'm pretty positive I bought like Buckland's like witchcraft book and a handful of other ones. And that was really where it started, in
Yeah.
addition to buying my first tarot card deck,
Oh, how
which
did
is
that go?
like, so here's the interesting thing. There's like myth, and there are
Yes.
people that will be out there that like, you should never buy your own
I
first tarot card
disagree
deck.
with this so much, but yes, I've heard this many times. Yeah.
100%. Well, there's the heretic in me. Don't tell me
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And so I did. I bought my first tarot card deck and I started leveraging and using it. And I think that was really a big. So I started doing that. I had a friend, her and I would start doing some spells.
Yeah.
I literally, I don't recall the exact first spell that worked, but I can recall the like shock and awe the first time a
Yeah.
spell worked.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I can remember being like, oh my God, I think I just did that. And, yeah, so it was just kind of like in that youth, in my younger, you know, teenage years, it was kind of just dabbling. But the psychic
Yeah.
stuff was kind of a bigger deal.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so, both reading tarot cards for myself and some of my friends, but my grandmother, who's on the other side,
Mhm.
passed away when I was around the age of 19.
Mm.
And my grandmother uh, is a devout Catholic woman that is
Mhm.
also a medium, but she referred to it as talking to the angels.
Ah, yes.
And I speculated, I was on vacation it was the year after my grandmother had passed. My grandfather got a number of family members together and we're going on vacation. And he invited me and he said, I'll pay for your airfare and your hotel. You just have to pay for food. And what 19-year-old is going to turn down a free trip to Maui for 10
Of
days?
course. Yeah.
None. So
Right.
I went and I'm sitting in the room with my aunts and my cousins. And I, even though every single one of them there was able to sit with my grandmother at some point and witness her talking to the angels, I never was.
Oh.
And I speculated, though. I'd made a comment to my aunt while we were there. I said, I think I might be able to do it. So my aunt gets my other aunts and my cousins to agree to allow me to try.
Yeah.
And so here I am in Maui for the very first time, closing my eyes and trying to connect with spirits on the other side of the veil. Right. And I'm describing the same spirit guides that my grandmother had described while she was alive. I'm bringing up boyfriends and friends that I never knew that my aunts were aware of.
Sure.
Like all these people were popping up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was between the ages of like 16 and I would say really 22,
Mm.
was a lot of just, I'd finally accepted that I was done with the church, that that was not my path, that I wasn't Catholic. Boy, did that really ruffle my parents' feathers, right?
Yeah.
Because I still went to Catholic school. And then we
Yeah.
stopped taking Eucharist, stopped, going to confession, and they had real issues with that. But like, I don't feel right. Am I going to disrespect this other
Yeah.
religion if that's not what I believe, just because it makes you happy?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that was a lot of where it was in that beginning, and where that level of the spirituality kind of came about.
I think what's so interesting about your story, two things really pop out at me. One, when you're describing your grandmother who is a devout Catholic and is able to do this mediumship, essentially, but she calls it talking to the angels. How many people are out here who are kind of hiding in plain sight, not feeling like they can truly be their full selves, and are hiding under maybe a religion that wouldn't necessarily allow them to fully develop into that gift? Do you run across that a lot?
All the time. I
Yeah.
swear I have a beacon that says, it's like an invisible beacon that just pulls them in and says, come on, folks.
Yeah.
For all of you that are in religions that just don't feel like you quite fit in, let me share with you a way to fit in with that and all of this. I mean, I
Yeah.
literally know a Catholic priest who also identifies as a witch.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I need to meet that person. Now that sounds
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I've told people before. I'm like, wait a second. Have you ever been to a Catholic mass? Right? You went to Catholic
I went to a few
college.
masses.
Did you
Yeah.
go to?
Mhm,
Tell
mhm.
me, have you ever witnessed a more ritualistic event in your entire life?
Okay, yes. There you're drinking blood, you're eating flesh, there's smells, there's bells, there's chanting, there's sitting, there's standing, there's people in funny hats, and you have to wear these people wear these vestments, and you have to stand here and statues. Yeah, I mean it is, I don't want to call it pagan, but I mean as a former pagan, I'm like, this looks pretty pagan.
I mean, I every now and again. So I, in the esoteric kind of past in the Western like occult, there is such a thing as the Gnostic Mass,
Yes,
and it is
yes.
literally a
That.
representation of like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing. It's like I just don't understand. And I mean, if you go and you look into the Jewish practices,
Yeah.
Muslim, so many of them have so much deep, intense ritual, in
Yes.
them, and I'm like, how is your work any different than like a solitary practitioner practicing
Yeah.
witchcraft, right? Or like it's just Yeah, it's just mind blowing. So yes, so many folks
Yeah.
will approach me because, and
Mm.
I've got a Catholic background. I've got a
Yeah.
Christian upbringing, and I love Jesus. Jesus and him and I are really good friends,
Yeah.
right? Like amazing. So
Yeah.
I have no judgment in that, and I will absolutely 100% work with anyone that crosses my path that wants to know. And it's
Yeah.
funny, I say this. There are sometimes I think people just cross my path just so that I can give them permission to be themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so hard. It's so hard sometimes to feel like we can be our full authentic selves if
Mhm.
we grew up in restrictive religions. But the other thing that I find interesting about your story, you tell us this story about the trip to Maui, and as you're kind of practicing your mediumship in this kind of semi-public setting with your family, so it sounds like they were comfortable with your psychic abilities and mediumship, but not comfortable with you leaving the Catholic Church. So they wanted you to kind of do both. Is that kind of
Yeah.
correct?
So my parents were not on that trip.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, my parents were not
Okay.
on that trip. And so
Gotcha.
there's a little bit more, how would I say, my parents are a little bit more concerned with their reputation
Ah,
outwardly. My
yes.
father is an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in an alcoholic household, and right, control of perception, control of
Yes.
image, very
Yes.
much so
Yes.
a big deal. So where they would have preferred, because it wouldn't make them look bad if I continued to stay in the church,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's something they get to tout. Look at their good Catholic daughter, all of that kind of good stuff.
Yeah.
As far as the like witchcraft and the practicing and all of that, my mom probably didn't have that much of an issue with it, but my dad, the gifts run through my mom's side of the family, and
Mm-hmm.
my dad my dad had my mom committed multiple times throughout my childhood, and I am a
Oh, wow.
strong believer that it was because of her psychic gifts, and he was
Yeah.
dismissing them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a way to have power over the only way he could probably exert power over something he can't do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to hear the
Yeah.
most messed up story?
Yeah.
It's crazy, and this is, I tell you, and this is, for any of your listeners, you have kids, you have a family member, I don't care who it is. If somebody comes to you and speaks to you about like some kind of belief or whatever, I don't care how crazy it sounds, try to listen without judgment first, right?
Mhm.
Because there are
Mhm.
so many of us that are out there with these beautiful gifts, and because somebody looks at us, like looks at these gifts in the wrong fashion, we either depress them
Yeah.
or repress them,
Yeah.
or we end up suffering through them. And so my mom
Yeah.
suffered.
Yeah.
My mom, when I was around the age of 7 years old, worked for a company, and that company, she'd been there for about 11 months, 10, 11 months, and she started to tell my dad that she was suspicious that they'd tapped her lines, that they were listening on her phone calls, her private calls, her business calls, and everything.
Sure. Yeah.
And she kept telling my dad this, and was very concerned and upset to the point that it was putting her into states of, extreme
Mm.
anxiety.
Sure.
And so my
Yeah.
dad ended up having her committed. Fast forward, I'm not 7 years old, I'm 22 years old, and I accept a job at a company.
Oh God.
Lo and behold, about 6 months into that job, I'm talking, and I make the realization to the controller that this is the same place that my mom worked at when I was 7 years old.
Oh my
And I'm
God.
talking to the controller, and I'm said, "Hey," and the controller says, "I got to tell you something. I feel really bad." I said, "What?"
Don't tell me.
And she goes, "Years ago, your mom used to work here." I said, "Yeah, I know." She goes,
Yeah.
"Yeah, but I got to tell you something about that." I said, "What?" She goes, "I feel horrible because the CEO and the president of the company had me listening into her phone calls."
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
she knew. And she knew.
Yeah.
And no
And my
one
mom knew.
believed
And
her.
nobody, nope, nope,
Yeah.
nobody believed her. And
Yeah.
it's so often people want to dismiss these, whether it's these precognitive dreams, or,
Mhm.
these visions, or these, things that they're hearing or whatever. And they
Yeah.
want to dismiss because it's easier to dismiss than to believe that there is something like this possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I would love to get into, if you're willing to go down this route, is alcoholism, because you brought this
Mm-hmm.
up, and I'm also in recovery. I'm a recovering
Mm-hmm.
alcoholic, as are a lot of the people who listen to this show. And something that I've noticed with a lot of us is that we a lot of us have various spiritual gifts. You talked about your spiritual gifts coming through your mom's line. Same with my family; they go through my mom's line, and we all have kind of various emanations, various ways that our gifts develop. And one thing that I ended up doing was turning to alcohol to kind of turn off a lot of it and to numb the shame of being the weirdo,
Yep.
right?
Fitting in.
And yeah, all of this,
Fitting
a lot
in.
of this was all about fitting in, and honestly, a lot of this show that you're on is about the alchemy of, you know, coming out and being weird and letting people feel safe to be weird and be themselves. So I wanted to throw it over to you and kind of explore what that journey looked like for you with
Mm,
alcoholism, with AA, and how that journey even started and how you got out of it.
yeah. I said my dad is an alcoholic, and I
Yeah.
say still an alcoholic, and I'm actually no contact with my parents because of that.
Yeah.
Um, my alcoholism started. I truly take it all the way back to that very first sip of alcohol. Receiving first communion, and
Yeah.
that wasn't that that was that was a recognition of the feeling of the warmth of the alcohol and to feel the way that it felt in my body. But my dad
Mhm.
would leave these drinks sitting around the house.
Yeah.
They'd be half finished drinks, and he was a rum and coke drinker, and he was a half rum, half coke, right? They were stiff
Mm.
drinks.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could make the best rum and coke ever by the age of 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Um, and so I used to find those half finished drinks sitting around the house, and I would finish them.
Oh, wow.
As
Yeah.
little as like 8 years old.
Mhm.
Um, and so I've come to now realize that in the very same breath that um, there was a lot of, like, when I was little, like, that was more so I just enjoyed the way that it made me feel. Throughout my high school years, a lot of the alcohol consumption that I had done was a lot of fitting in. It was trying to find some place that I didn't feel weird,
Yeah.
right? I'm a strange bird.
Mhm.
I can easily overwhelm people with my own energy. We talk about human design. I'm a
Mm.
projector, so like being in my
Ah.
presence can be very, the name sunshine is intentional. Like, like it can be very beautiful, and then you step out of my light and you feel like,
Yeah.
right. And so, yeah, I drank to fit in, and it wasn't until probably really more so, I would say, even in my 20s, that I started to probably drink to quiet things. The
Mhm.
more I stepped into my spirituality, I didn't know. And so, I mean, my psychic abilities are strong. They're like, I hear, see,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I often say I'm not quite positive what dimension or timeline I'm even in at any given time,
Yeah.
right? Like I can jump in and out. And so I look at that now and I go, not only was it to quiet,
Yeah.
but it was also to deaden
Mm.
me from feeling,
Mhm.
right? Because I would feel other people's emotion.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
challenge with that, though, is that also meant I felt none of mine,
Oh, yeah.
right? Because I'm
Yeah.
drinking. If you're
Yeah.
not willing to feel somebody else's emotion, how in the world are you going to be able to feel your own, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
a lot of the alcohol was, it started as the fit in. It started as a way to, like, kind of have some I mean, I really didn't, growing up in an alcoholic household too. And I've recently had a
Mhm.
conversation with a client, if I didn't grow up with trauma in my childhood in the way that I did, it may have not transferred over into the alcoholism in the way that it did too, because I didn't
Yeah.
even feel like a child, like I could be myself in my own home, in my own house.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like I had no clue how to be me.
Mhm.
And then you put the alcohol in and you don't give a shit
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, fuck this. I don't care if I'm an asshole, if I'm
Yep.
the class clown, if I'm like the dirty slut that everybody wants to bang. I'm just whatever, right? You
Mhm.
have no care about it. And so, yeah, then you start to realize, I mean, personally speaking, people started to like the boisterous, outgoing, drunk Jen.
Mhm.
I mean, it was literally drunk Jen. My birth given name is Jen.
Yeah.
Sunshine's my universe given name. And it was horrid. It was horrible. And I mean, I've done it's very, the only thing I've done that I've ever really regretted was getting married. There's not a lot of things that even though I've drank and done some really shitty things, right? There's
Yeah.
not like, I don't regret
Yeah.
the lessons that I've learned along the way.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
But it did. It got messy. You know, I drank throughout my 20s. I had difficult times in relationships in my 20s. I put myself into situations that I probably never would have been. I chased sex
Mm.
instead of love. I thought sex was love,
Mm-hmm.
right? I really didn't even know what love. I mean, I had no clue like how amazing, like the feeling of love, and like I just no clue. Like alcohol was so blinding and
Yeah.
so, and you know, and I would love to think that the days that I didn't drink, like, but no, I mean, like, I can't, when I was active in my alcoholism, even if I went a week without a drink, I was thinking about the next time I would be able to drink, right? Like,
Yeah.
it was like crazy how much
Yeah.
time you spend thinking about drinking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I had, it was 2017, and father that's an alcoholic
Mm.
found himself on his deathbed.
Yeah.
He had drank himself. He'd been told he had had congestive heart failure for almost 8 years at that particular point.
Wow.
His heart was now operating at 6%. His liver and his kidneys were shutting down. His entire
Oh my
body was
God.
going because of alcoholism. No other reason. His
Yeah.
doctor literally told him he would have been better off smoking a pack a day than
Oof.
continuing to keep drinking when the point when his heart started to deteriorate to the level that it was.
Wow.
Right. And for anybody listening, I'm going to tell you, like, we're not talking about, like, this isn't a guy that was drinking 2/5 a day. You
Right.
know, he was drinking a half a pint every
Mm.
weeknight. That's,
Oof.
you know, like, it's still a lot, but like, he's not drowning bottles. It was the
Right.
consistency, the length, every
Yeah.
day almost. Right. So these, you know, these folks that are like, oh, it's only a 6-pack. I mean, it's
Right.
it's
And
only
it
two
does
beers.
damage. It does damage.
It's like,
Yeah.
it does damage. It is
Yeah.
literally a poison. It is
Yeah.
meant to kill things. You can pour it on an open wound and kill bacteria. If you
Yeah.
don't think it's not doing the same thing when you pour it into your body, you're fucking crazy.
You're
Right?
right.
And so here he is, and we're literally, you know, I'm having the conversation as an adult that you'd never want to have with your fucking parent, which is, how do you want to die?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so he had a choice at that particular time that he could get a life-saving, incredibly invasive surgery called an LVAD, a left ventricular assist device, a pump input into his heart to pump his blood.
Mm.
His heart would no longer pump. He would have
Yeah.
a pump that electrically doing that,
Yeah.
or he would go into hospice.
Yeah.
I told him, whatever your choice, I'll support it. Well, the surgery would not even be approved if
Mm.
I didn't take a 2.5-month leave of absence
Ooh.
from work.
Wow.
So I had to take 2.5 months leave of absence for work. My father went through this whole surgery, and here it is, you know, I'm drinking. I'm still drinking. Even while he is in there in the hospital, I'm still drinking because I don't know any other way to deal with such a traumatic thing that is going on in my life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No other way. We fast forward, he gets through recovery. Well, the cool thing about that is that was supposed to help improve his health to the point that he would possibly be able to get on the heart transplant list.
Yeah.
So this is 2017. We hit summer of 2018, July of 2018. My dad gets the call. He's on the heart transplant list for 45 days. Do you know how quickly, with the average time? It's like something like 9 months.
Wow.
My dad gets that call 45 days onto the list. Well, you think this is a miracle and this is a great thing, but at the same fucking time, my cousin, who is a year younger than me, is in the hospital with alcoholism because his body's doing the same fucking thing that my dad. His liver is shut down, his kidney is shutting down. But my cousin's body is so deteriorated that my father, who has lived a long life, can get a heart, and my cousin can't get any help. My cousin passed away in January of 2018.
Oh, I'm sorry.
2019 from alcoholism.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And it was at that particular time that I just knew. And so I tried, I had a conversation with my therapist. I said, you know, I think I've got a problem. And in January 2019, I tried to commit to 90 days without alcohol. and I reached day 83.
Mm.
And my demon was so fucking smart
Yeah. Yeah.
that he convinced me on day 83, when I was in the darkest bout of depression I had ever felt, 83 days of trying without a drink, somehow managed to convince me that I was happier while drinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I drank again for another 4.5 months
Mm.
until I was on vacation with my partner at that time. And we were, 6 or 7 hours away. Beautiful vacation I had planned. And, he was a drinking partner at that time.
Mm.
And he got sick. And we had to leave and come home from vacation 2 days early. And I was so mad. How dare
Oh,
he ruin my
yeah.
fucking vacation?
Yeah.
So we got back and he was sick and I kept drinking without him.
Oh,
To the
wow.
point that I finally ended up back at work that Monday and I was shaking.
Yeah.
Everybody, I
The
don't know if you've ever had
tremors.
it that bad, but the
No, but
shakes,
I've seen the tremors. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sweat,
Yeah.
I can feel it on my body.
Yeah.
And I ended up in my therapy that night, and I walk into her office, and I started crying. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic. It was the first time I actually admitted I was an alcoholic, and by golly, it wasn't the last relapse.
It never is. It never is. I've never met one addict that had
shit.
that's never.
Oh,
It's
God,
I've had
no.
a few under my belt, so I get it.
So, I mean, I stepped closer. I at least, admitted
Yeah.
that I was powerless over alcohol at that particular point, but I didn't know how to get help.
Yeah.
And for some odd reason, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, I've been this kind of stubborn heretic of like, don't tell me how to do things, and
Yeah.
I'm going to challenge the status quo. And I thought I could do it on my own, and so I did. I made it 63 days, and the same partner and I jetted off to Costa Rica to celebrate my 40th birthday.
Mm.
We never talked about alcohol before we left.
Uh-oh.
And so at this particular point, I had told him, I said, I don't mind if you keep drinking. I said, just, please don't do it around me. It's just not a fan of that.
Yeah.
And so we walk off the plane in Costa Rica, and he heads right over to duty free and buys himself 2 liters.
Oh, God. Here
And
we
I was
go.
just like floored. And I know, like, the whole time, I'm like, I don't know what to do. 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 And, we've got like a 2-hour ride to the resort. We get to the resort, still nothing. He's sitting now. He's having a beer at the swim up bar, and now I'm just swimming. And he's sitting there, and all it took, I swear to God, all it took is he leaned over to me and he goes, I won't tell. And that was it.
Yeah.
And I drank that day, and then was so hungover the next day I didn't drink. And then the next day was my 40th birthday. And by 5:30, 5 o'clock, I was hiding drugs in his luggage.
Oh.
Telling him he was the worst person. I mean, the shit I had said to him was so horrific.
Yeah.
Horrific that I was so mad. I had my 40th birthday dinner.
Yeah.
We had a special private dinner with the chef in the restaurant.
Yeah.
Only reason I know I went is because I have photos of the meal.
Yeah.
I went by myself.
Oh, wow.
I have videos of me up throughout the whole night of me recording, me tears and crying. Spent like 3 hours on the phone with a friend back at home in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
The resort gave him his own room.
Yeah. Wow.
It was such a horrific experience.
Yeah.
Such a horrific experience. And, you would think that might have stopped. But I mean, I was all balls to the walls as it was. So now it was all the alcohol I can consume. He managed at some point. We did we didn't get back together, but we got back to party because he managed to find Coke. So we're doing it was a horrific event. And finally, the very last night, I was like, what do we do? We're going home. And his response was, if you want to continue to stay together, you have to do 90 meetings in 90 days.
Oh, wow.
And he himself was a recovering addict.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother fucking story there.
Yeah.
But I drank in the airport on the way home.
Mm-hmm.
When I got back, it was a Tuesday night. We got back late. On Wednesday, I only knew one person that I'd ever known in my entire life that had been in AA. I'd seen him like I went to like I worked a job in high school with him. I hadn't talked
Mm-hmm.
to or seen this guy in like I don't even know 20 something years.
Sure.
And I message him out of the blue and I'm like, "Hi, I need help.
Mm.
I've never been to a meeting. Can you please take me to a meeting?" And he hadn't been
Oh,
in
wow.
months and he's like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And we show up at a meeting local to the house and I'm horrified.
Yeah.
Horrified.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm so horrified. I'm
Yeah.
horrified because I'm still in this like whirlwind of shame and guilt of what I've
Mm-hmm.
done,
Yeah.
right? But I'm horrified at sitting in front of a bunch of fucking strangers
Mm-hmm.
because I don't even know who the hell I am, let alone to sit in. Yeah, I mean, it was just, and so that first day they told me, they're like, you don't have to talk, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And they told me just to keep coming back.
Yep. It works if you work it.
And I don't think I did that the first couple of days, but so that was like a Friday, I think, that he was able to take me. And so that Monday, from that point forward, I finished 90 meetings in 90
Mm,
days.
love it.
Yep.
Wow.
And I, still to this day, when I find someone or I come across someone, and don't get me wrong, like AA is not for everyone. I'll
Mm-hmm.
never be, I still don't, but I know where all the meetings are. If I
Yeah.
go someplace, I will look up to find where meetings are just fucking in case, because I'm
Yeah.
never going to find myself in the position that I found myself in when I hit my rock bottom at 40. I'm
Yeah.
never going to be there. I like that is the place for me to avoid. And I
Mm.
will continue to tell that story over and over again, to remind myself why I still don't pick up another drink. I haven't picked one
Yeah.
up since. It's been
Oof.
over 4 years.
Wow. First of
Yeah.
all, congratulations and thank you for sharing that story and being so open about it, because I think a lot of people feel like they can never come back from that part of their journey if they experience things like that. But one thing that I've noticed from talking with you is that you seem fairly comfortable going into the dark spaces. It seems
Mm.
like you're able to navigate in and out of those dark spaces really well. And I saw that you mentioned on your site you are a shadow worker. What does that mean to you? Is this shadow work? What is shadow work?
Oh God, it is. Yeah. What is shadow work? It's a term that was coined by the psychiatrist Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Right. And Carl Jung states that every single one of us human beings have things within our psyche that we kind of hide,
Yeah.
right? These are shadows that we hide. And, you know, these can be anything. It can be, it really can. And it can be from, uh, we're talking about the alcoholism and right. We're talking about
Mhm.
drinking and even it being a bit of the, you know, needing it to dampen some of the voices and the spirit,
Mhm.
like just recognizing that these gifts were lying there dormant is a bit of shadow. So anytime
Yeah.
we go and we explore something that maybe we weren't willing to face about ourselves, right? Like, I think about every individual that has ever had to go through and find their sexual identity.
Mhm.
They're doing some shadow work, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They're doing some like shadow work. So anytime you've had to go look, deeper into yourself or like truly explore and say, and these are not surface level. Like if you're doing shadow work, you're experiencing shame, guilt, fear,
Mhm.
anxiety. You're experiencing discomfort. There's probably some suffering going on, right? Ideally, you're going to get through it, but like there are these really like dark and like deeply, even in some regards dangerous emotions, right?
Mhm.
Because if you think about it, there's those of us addicts that would say that's what we've been avoiding,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's why we drink, that's why we drug, that's why we,
Mhm.
sex, that's why we, because we don't want to deal or be in all of that. But no, I have ever since I was in my 20s. There's a book and it's actually amusing. I don't know if you've ever read The Four Agreements.
Oh, of course. Yes. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Still one of my favorite books. I read it in my early 20s. Changed my life and my perspective on human relationship and how we relate to self and everything like that. Because I read a couple of his books at that point. And I just, so many of us find reasons to avoid
Mm.
looking at the dark things, looking at the uncomfortable things, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's people will tell you to avoid it. I've literally a client this afternoon grew up with a family that loved to sweep everything under the rug.
Yeah.
Like everything, anything that was mentioned that was wrong or was, swept under the rug. And so you think about that. If you've grown up in a household, in a family where like you've never approached uncomfortable conversations, you've never looked at why things are happening. You don't talk about like why Uncle Gary has like a weird, habit and nobody really likes him to stick around at the parties for longer than about an hour. Like nobody, yeah. So if you grow up in a family that hides all that, the likelihood that you're going to be comfortable.
Right.
Yeah. Shadow work is yeah. And I am, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute myself for a second because I also am wondering, sometimes this happens when someone shows up.
You know what's so funny that you were, okay, I'm glad you said that, because I feel like, at least on my side, someone stepped in right here about like 2 or 3 minutes ago. I was getting, it just feels like someone's like standing right over my shoulder. And I know listen, this episode isn't about me. You're a practicing medium. I was training to be a medium years ago. I'll probably end up doing an episode about that journey and why I left the spiritualist church. But it never stopped. That doesn't go away from me. So like I was sitting here and I was like, man, I think somebody's right here. But I'm like, it's not a good time to bring this up. And then when you start having the throat chakra stuff, I was like, oh man, you can't get two witchy people together without stuff happening.
And so the challenge is being a medium when I'm not paying attention and they want to make themselves known.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the ways they'll do it is sitting in me. And so when it's like this would typically could be someone that that has passed either through like, I'm getting like asthmatic, very, very intense asthmatic.
Yeah.
Right? Like
I wonder.
COPD, end of life, emphysema and end of life, like this level of very difficult breathing on oxygen. And I'm even hearing the literal oxygen mask at this particular point.
I'm going to have to think of who that was. I was trying to, so what popped into my head as we were talking was someone on my mom's side, not anyone specifically, but I was thinking, I think someone from my mom's side is stepping in because we were talking about magic coming through the mom's side. We're talking about shadow work. And I was thinking about like, alchemy and like a lot of things. So I was thinking maybe it's someone on my mom's side, but I don't know.
Yeah. You can explore that later. But here's the interesting thing too, as you're saying that, part of what's kind of coming through on that, when we're talking about shadow work, sometimes these shadows aren't ours.
Yeah.
Sometimes these shadows are like ancestral shadows.
Yeah.
That have been passed down through generations.
Yeah.
Right? Passed down through generations. So you think about, for me, I said, my father's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
That is an ancestral shadow that I actually, if I look back into like many of my lineage.
Yeah.
And I've explored, I've asked, my father's an alcoholic. I've actually looked, his mother was an alcoholic.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I don't ever have any memories of my grandmother drinking.
Yeah.
But I've looked and yep.
Yeah.
Those exist.
Yep.
And going all the way back. So like sometimes the interesting thing of our shadow, right? We think like it's just our pieces, right? But often as we uncover things, that's why I say shadow work never ends. We're doing this throughout our entire life.
Yeah.
Right? They become more complex. They become deeper.
Yeah.
Right? That you are starting to go back in and dig through things that maybe came about, with your mom's side, your father's side, great grandmother brought this in, right?
Yeah.
These stories that are, just lingering in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Because maybe somebody else had a truth that isn't ours anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that. I tell people all the time that when you heal things, it heals your line backwards and forwards. I believe that to my core, that, either epigenetically or just spiritually, they're hanging around and are like rooting you on to heal because it heals something that they were going through too. So
100%.
Yeah, sorry that I brought spirit to our conversation.
It is not uncommon. It is not uncommon at all. I will tell you, it is not uncommon that they come forward. It is
Yeah.
not common
Yeah.
that they are strong enough to disrupt me, though.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
whoever it is definitely has got some power on their side.
Then it's definitely on my mom's side. I think for sure it's somebody on my mom's side that is saying hi, and I'll do some work today and this week to try to figure out what they're trying to tell me. But I think I know.
It is
Yeah.
it is a female,
Yeah.
short, really short.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be my grandma then. That might be my grandma who's passed, who was extremely magical. In first lady of a church, my granddad was a
Mm.
minister, but had serious gifts, probably similar to your grandmother, and was really only able, I think, to enjoy them in the context of the Baptist church. She's one of those people who I'm always trying to learn more about her story, because I'm like, man, knowing how magical my mom is, I'm like, she must have been powerful, powerful, powerful.
It's so I one of the things that I teach is
Yeah.
that like that bloodline, that
Yeah.
spiritual passing down is
Yeah.
not only it's just in the like witchy way.
Yeah.
If you have someone that's very strong, devout, religious, like hearing that
Yeah.
pastor, minister, things
Yeah.
of that, it's the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same intent. Like
Yeah.
if there is an intense spiritual belief in,
Yeah.
in even a religion, that's an indication of
Yeah.
a very strong magical bloodline.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, it's something I'm continuously digging into, and as evidenced by today. But listen, I know we only have a few minutes left, so I really wanted to make sure that we talk about some of your offerings. And in particular, I wanted to talk about Illuminate Unschool of Witchcraft, because first of all, the name I love. Illuminate, I love that name because it kind of connects to sunshine. But what is an unschool of witchcraft?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So illuminate, yes, it does connect to sunshine. I also like the term because
Yeah.
I don't claim that I'm teaching like mystery school, but
Yeah.
like illuminate, it is like let's find out what you've yet to discover, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to break down the unschool of witchcraft piece.
Yeah.
And unschooling is a term that is used in the homeschooling kind of community.
Yep.
That I really, really adored when I discovered what it meant.
Yeah.
And an unschool, in essence, is pretty much means that the teacher themselves doesn't provide the curriculum.
Okay.
The students do.
Yeah.
The students provide the curriculum by the requests of what they need to be taught.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my belief is that from a witchcraft perspective, there are three pillars. There's the psychic pillar, there's the magic pillar, and there's the healing pillar. Right? And so the unschool has a framework that we are able to teach psychic and divination technique, right? So think about psychic abilities, all the different clairs, everything that you could possibly imagine with your psychic, from remote viewing to telepathy to everything. We practice and we try.
Yeah.
We've got the magic, right? So we're teaching ritual, we're teaching intention, we're teaching alchemy. We do most of the magic is alchemical work, working on the inside in order to bring changes out. And then from the healing art. So I'm a Reiki master teacher.
Yeah.
So being able to teach people how to leverage and use energy, to do healing about energy, how to use and leverage even their intuitive gifts, their actual psychic abilities to know and understand how to work with somebody from a healing capacity.
Yeah.
And so the framework within itself exists, but depending upon what the students themselves or the folks that are within Illuminate want to learn and leverage, what they want to explore, that's what we actually go in and teach. So I use a lot of my own intuition and my guides to determine what actually shows up based upon their feedback. The biggest thing that I love and adore so much about Illuminate, it's been around, I gave birth to it just over a year ago. And so we've just got folks finishing their first year. And I have two of them that are going to join in as mentors and instructors next year.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, Illuminate is intended to allow people to start their own business.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So not only is there the opportunity for folks as they graduate to go and start their own business, right? And continue on and learn, this is what I do for my own business, but I have, it's even crazy to say, I guess, 25 years, which is just kind of behind me in business, marketing, technology, and things of that nature.
Sure.
So able to help not only make sure that these folks have the skills and the abilities to step in and to do this work as a spiritual advisor, a psychic, a medium, a coach, or anything of that nature, but also the business acumen to allow them to help start they also have the opportunity to join the family as
Mm.
somebody that's providing services through the family. So
Wow.
I'm really excited about it. I have a new coach I'm working with this year that's really going to challenge me to take it even to the next level.
Yeah.
But I'm watching the people in it, and I don't know. We haven't talked about like what any of your background is or anything, but I don't know if you've ever like taught. Do you have kids?
I have one kid. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
have one kid. How
yeah.
old is your child?
She's only 15 months. She's young.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, there's this like really fascinating thing that you're going to go through. And
yeah,
I think it's a beautiful experience. I think
yeah,
teachers and mentors experience, I think parents, where you literally get to watch like the light bulb click,
yeah. Yeah,
where they like get something, where
yeah,
they literally, you'd watch, like if we were playing a video game, they would level up.
yeah.
Right. And I literally get to watch them do this. And I
Mm-hmm.
get to watch them, use their own gifts and to explore their magic and their healing. And I get all of the stories of how they're trying it elsewhere.
Yeah,
And I mean, there is just nothing more delightful and enjoyable
yeah,
than to feel people truly like start to blossom,
yeah,
to feel comfortable, using these gifts, to see the change.
yeah,
It's just amazing. It's amazing. I don't
yeah.
have children, so I think it's about the closest as I'll ever have.
I mean, they call parenting the ultimate mentorship. I heard somebody say that. So I think it's very, very aligned when you're watching people, like you said, have that light bulb come on, learn new things. You get to guide and help, show them where their own path is. I think that's absolutely beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
so last question before we get to where people can find Illuminate and your other offerings. I ask every guest this question, and I think you've already given a lot of good tidbits, but is there any advice that you would give to, I call us spiritual misfits, but seekers, people who are still trying to figure out what the hell they believe? Do you have any advice
Mm.
for those people?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
My biggest advice is just to believe something,
Mm.
right? Just to believe in something, right? And I don't care if the belief is in nothing. Even that is making a choice to believe in nothing,
Mm.
right? Just choose to believe in something, right? The moment that you do that, you're able to anchor yourself into some truth that you are claiming for your own, and you're able to bounce your existence and your reality and perspective against it. That doesn't mean that you can't change that truth. That doesn't mean that you can't believe something else, but it anchors you in a place,
Mm-hmm.
right, that you now have something to be able to seek that truth against. Just choose something to believe in.
Mm.
That's like one of my favorite pieces of advice, because the moment you do that, the moment you find an anchor, you've got a place to ground in, you've got a place to find community in,
Mm-hmm.
right? You talked about all my labels in the very beginning, and
Yeah.
I joke, there's one of my podcast episodes of my own that I talk about labels. Labels aren't for ourselves, it's for other people to see who we are
Yeah.
and to know that they could connect with us.
Yeah.
Right? So the moment you choose to believe in something, that means that your community can extend, it can expand, you can have more support. Yeah. So that's my biggest piece of advice. Just choose to believe in something.
And if folks are in need of your services, if they're looking for a community, if they think they might be right for Illuminate, where can they find you?
Yeah. The number one place that I always tell people is email me first,
Yeah.
right? I am on the other side of that email. And that's sunshine@sunshinereadings.com.
Yeah.
I get them. I look at them. I read them. I love to chat and to talk with people. Don't ever hesitate. I also tell folks, I always say, like, people always get nervous. I don't want to bother you. It's never a bother. You could never be a bother to me, ever,
Yeah.
ever, ever. So that's the very first piece. The next one is you can find me at sunshinereadings.com. That is where you'll see you can access the podcast, the blogs, all of the events, all of the offerings, everything that we've got. Or then, depending upon when this will actually air, we are doing some adjustments and changes. So
Mhm.
I think you said this might be a little bit of next year. So you
Yeah.
can probably also find us on illuminateunschool.com.
Oh,
So that's one of the things
okay.
I'll be working on over the course of the next 30 days. So
Yeah.
definitely take a look. Reach out to me through email. That is always my preferred way, because I find that most of the time people have more questions when we
Mhm.
first talk. And so that is the easiest way for you to find out what you need. Don't worry about searching through everything. You can just ask me directly.
Thank you, Sunshine, so much for coming on the show. You are a magical, magical witch. I swear. You are magical, magical.
I appreciate it so much, Camille. It's been an absolute pleasure. And anytime,
Yeah.
please feel free to connect. And if you ever want me to come back, I'd be happy to join.
Absolutely. Are you kidding? Today was amazing. We'll have to do this again. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Highly Spiritual Person podcast. I really hope you found this conversation inspiring and uplifting. If you did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more updates. And remember, sharing is caring, so if you think others would benefit from this content, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and family. We'll be back with more exciting content, so stay tuned and stay curious.